"Jack, this table is for real family. Go find yourself a spot in the corner." My uncle laughed, and the others nodded with smirks. The waiter dropped a $2,500 bill in front of me. I calmly finished my tea and smiled. They had no idea who was actually paying for the banquet tonight. Growing up in the South Side of Chicago wasn't easy, especially when half your family thought they were better than you. That was my reality. Jack Wilson, the nephew nobody expected much from. My dad worked 2 jobs just to keep our lights on, while my Uncle Robert flaunted his middle management position like he was running Wall Street. But every family gathering was the same story. Uncle Robert holding court, showing off his new watch, or bragging about Thomas getting into some fancy private school, while my mom would squeeze my hand under the table, whispering that our time would come. I still remember the Christmas when I was 15. Uncle Robert gave everyone else gift cards to high-end stores, but handed me a $20 bill with a smirk, saying, "Don't spend it all in one place, kid." That was the moment I promised myself I'd never need anything from him again. While Cousin Thomas partied through college on Uncle Robert's dime, I worked night shifts coding and building websites. By 22, I dropped out of community college to launch my first startup with my roommate Michael Chen, a brilliant guy who saw something in me that my family never did. Fast forward 8 years, and MindSync, our AI-powered productivity platform, had just closed a Series C funding round valuing the company at $340 million, 0 cents. We'd quietly become one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the Midwest before relocating to New York. Emma, my fiancée, kept telling me to brag a little at family gatherings, but I preferred keeping things low-key. "They'll figure it out eventually," I'd tell her with a shrug. The truth was, I enjoyed watching Uncle Robert assume I was still struggling, still the family disappointment. The annual Wilson family reunion was always held the first weekend in May, and this year Uncle Robert had announced he was treating everyone to dinner at Sapphire, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. What he didn't know was that Sapphire was part of the Cerulean Group, a restaurant portfolio I'd acquired 6 months earlier as a side investment. I hadn't told anyone in the family about it, not even my parents. Some surprises are worth waiting for. As Emma and I got dressed for the evening, she noticed the small smile playing on my lips. "You're up to something tonight, aren't you?" she asked, adjusting my tie. I just kissed her forehead and grabbed my keys. Let's just say the annual Wilson family dinner might be a little different this year. The May evening air felt electric as Emma and I pulled up to Sapphire in a modest Uber rather than the Tesla I usually drove. Appearances, after all, were everything tonight. The restaurant's blue-tinted glass facade glowed against the Manhattan skyline, and I couldn't help but feel a flutter of excitement in my stomach. Daniel, the manager I'd hired personally, gave me a subtle nod as we entered, playing along with my request to be treated like any other guest tonight. "Mr. Wilson, welcome to Sapphire," he said formally, a hint of conspiracy in his eyes. Uncle Robert was already holding court near the koi pond in the waiting area, Aunt Patricia draped in pearls beside him. Cousin Thomas stood nearby, laughing too loudly at something, his Harvard Business School class ring flashing as he gestured. They'd all arrived in a limousine, rented, I was certain, as Uncle Robert's company had been struggling since losing its biggest client last year. Not that anyone in the family knew that except me. I made it my business to know these things. When Uncle Robert spotted us, his smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Nick, Jack, and Emma, right?" he called out, as if he hadn't met her 3 times before. "How's that little computer business of yours, still fixing people's laptops?" He chuckled, looking around at the other family members who smiled obligingly. Emma squeezed my hand, a silent reminder to stay calm. "Actually, Uncle Robert, we're in enterprise software now," I replied evenly. "But how about you? I heard Westridge Industries moved their contract overseas. That must have been tough." His face flushed slightly before he recovered. "Just a minor restructuring. We've got bigger clients lined up." The maitre d' appeared then, saving Uncle Robert from further explanation. "The Wilson party? Your table is ready." As we followed him through the restaurant, I caught glimpses of the improvements I'd authorized, the new hand-painted murals, the custom lighting that had cost more than Uncle Robert's car. The private dining room I'd reserved for our family was the most exclusive in the restaurant, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Uncle Robert puffed up immediately. "I requested the best table, of course," he announced to everyone, though I knew for a fact he'd booked a standard table for 12 through the public reservation line. Daniel had called me laughing about it. As everyone filed in, oohing and aahing over the view and the elegant place settings with hand-calligraphed name cards, another touch I'd added, I hung back slightly, savoring the moment. Emma leaned close, whispering, "They have no idea, do they?" I shook my head, watching Uncle Robert examine the crystal glasses with feigned expertise. "Not a clue," I murmured back. "But they will soon enough." The chandelier cast diamond-like reflections across the mahogany table as everyone began finding their seats. I'd asked Daniel to deliberately leave off 2 place settings at the main table, a small detail that would serve my purpose perfectly. Uncle Robert, naturally, positioned himself at the head of the table, with Aunt Patricia and his favorite cousin Thomas flanking him like loyal courtiers. I guided Emma toward the main table, but before we could sit down, Uncle Robert cleared his throat dramatically. "Hold up there, Jack," he called out, not quite looking me in the eye. "We've got a bit of a seating issue. We need these spots for the real contributors to the family." He gestured vaguely to his side of the family tree, the ones who showed up at his country club fundraisers and sent their kids to the same private schools. "Why don't you and Emma, was it? Take that nice little table in the corner. It's cozy." His lips curved into what he probably thought was a generous smile but came across as pure condescension. The room fell awkwardly silent. My cousin Melissa studied her napkin intently while her husband suddenly became fascinated with the ceiling moldings. Even Thomas had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, though it didn't stop him from adding, "Yeah, Jack, you'll be fine over there. We need to discuss some family business anyway." The unspoken message hung in the air. Family business that didn't concern me. That's when Uncle Robert delivered the line I'd somehow been expecting my whole life. "Jack, this table is for real family. Go find yourself a spot in the corner." He laughed, a short barking sound that always reminded me of a sea lion, and several others joined in with nervous chuckles. Thomas nodded along, smirking like he'd just been told he'd made partner. My aunt studiously rearranged her silverware, complicit in her silence. Emma's fingers dug into my arm, her face flushing with anger on my behalf. She started to speak, my fiery defender always ready for battle, but I suddenly shook my head. This moment needed to play out exactly as it was. I could feel her confusion. She'd expected me to finally stand up to Uncle Robert, to mention the company valuation or the features about MindSync that had recently appeared in Tech Insider and Forbes. Instead, I simply nodded and guided her toward the small table tucked against the wall. "No problem at all, Uncle Robert," I replied, my voice even. "We'll be comfortable over here." As we walked away, I heard his disappointed huff. He'd clearly been hoping for more of a reaction. What he couldn't see was the slight smile I couldn't quite suppress. Emma looked at me with bewilderment as we sat down at our isolated table. "Jack, why are you letting him treat you like this?" she whispered fiercely, especially tonight of all nights. I took her hand across the small table, running my thumb over the engagement ring that had cost more than Uncle Robert's house. "Because," I whispered back, "sometimes the best revenge isn't what you say, it's what you do." I glanced over at Kevin, our trusted waiter for the evening, who gave me an imperceptible nod. Everything was going exactly according to plan. From our corner perch, Emma and I had a perfect view of the Wilson family spectacle. Uncle Robert ordered the 1982 Bordeaux without bothering to check the price, while Aunt Patricia insisted on the caviar sampler to start. Thomas, ever the follower, pointed dramatically at the Wagyu beef on the menu. "Only the best tonight, right, Uncle Rob?" I caught Kevin's eye as he took their orders, and he gave me the slightest wink. The menus at Sapphire didn't list prices for a reason. It created exactly this kind of reckless abandon among those trying to impress. "I can't believe they're acting like this," Emma muttered, stabbing at her salad. Her loyalty warmed me more than she knew. Growing up, as I did, always on the outside looking in, made Emma's unwavering support feel like a miracle sometimes. "Just wait," I whispered. "The best part is coming." She raised an eyebrow but trusted me enough not to press further. Halfway through the main course, the restaurant's heavy glass door swung open and Michael Chen strode in, looking every bit the successful tech entrepreneur in his perfectly tailored Brunello Cucinelli suit. I'd texted him the timing earlier. He spotted me immediately and headed toward our little corner table, deliberately passing by the main family gathering. "Jack, there you are, man," he called out, his voice carrying just enough to make every head at the main table turn. Uncle Robert's fork paused halfway to his mouth as Michael clapped me on the shoulder. "Sorry I'm late. That call with Singapore ran long. They want to increase their order by another 20 million. He pulled up a chair, nodding politely toward the main table before turning back to me. "The Tokyo team sent over the new projections for Q3. We're looking at a 30% increase over forecast." I could practically hear the mental calculations happening at the main table. Michael wasn't being subtle, and that was exactly the point. "Michael Chen," he introduced himself, extending a hand toward Emma. "Though I guess you already know that, since Jack won't shut up about you at the office." Emma played along perfectly, laughing as if this wasn't all semi-orchestrated. "So that's your business partner," Uncle Robert called over, suddenly interested in our corner. "The computer repair business must be booming." His attempt at humor fell flat as Michael turned, confusion evident on his face. "Computer repair? Oh, you mean MindSync?" He laughed, glancing at me with amusement. "I guess you could call enterprise AI solutions computer repair if you really stretched the definition." The family's attention was now fully captured, especially when Thomas's girlfriend whispered something in his ear that made his eyes widen. I recognized the moment she made the connection. She worked in tech recruitment and had probably finally placed where she'd heard of MindSync before. Throughout the rest of the meal, I could feel the dynamic shifting. Cousin Melissa suddenly remembered she needed to ask me about a tech problem. Thomas's girlfriend kept stealing glances our way. Even Aunt Patricia tried to join our conversation from across the room, asking loudly about that internet company of mine, but it was Uncle Robert's reaction I enjoyed most. The calculated indifference. The way he kept trying to steer conversation back to his recent golf trip to Scottsdale, even as the table's interest clearly lay elsewhere. As dessert was served, I noticed Kevin conferring with Daniel near the kitchen door. They both glanced my way, and I gave them an almost imperceptible nod. The final act was about to begin, and despite years of imagining this moment, my heart beat faster than I expected. Some wounds, it seems, never fully heal. They just wait for their moment of reckoning. The evening was winding down, coffees and digestifs making their rounds as conversation at the main table grew louder with each empty glass. Uncle Robert held court with exaggerated gestures, regaling everyone with the same story about his hole-in-one at Pebble Beach that he'd been recycling for 3 years. I checked my watch. Right on cue, Kevin appeared from the kitchen, carrying a single leather portfolio. The defining moment of the evening had arrived. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my green tea, savoring both its subtle flavor and the scene about to unfold. Kevin approached our table with practiced precision, his expression professionally neutral despite knowing exactly what was about to happen. "Mr. Wilson," he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "your bill, sir." With a small bow, he placed the leather folio directly in front of me. The reaction was immediate. Uncle Robert's story stuttered to a halt mid-sentence, his eyes darting between Kevin, the bill, and me. "There must be some mistake," he called out, his voice carrying that forced joviality people use when they're suddenly uncomfortable. "I arranged to host tonight. That should come to me." Kevin, whom I'd personally hired from a Michelin-starred restaurant in San Francisco, didn't miss a beat. "No mistake, sir. The reservation and payment arrangements were confirmed this morning with Mr. Jack Wilson." He stepped back respectfully as I opened the portfolio. Inside lay the bill, $2,537.42 to be exact. The Bordeaux alone was nearly $800, 0 cents. The Wagyu beef, Thomas had insisted on adding another $320, 0 cents. I didn't even blink at the figure. Why would I? This restaurant's monthly revenue reports crossed my desk regularly. Instead, I simply continued drinking my tea, allowing a small, satisfied smile to play across my lips. The silence from the main table was deafening. Aunt Patricia's hand flew to her pearl necklace, her nervous tell since I was a kid. Thomas's girlfriend whispered something in his ear, and his face drained of color. Uncle Robert, however, began to stand up, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "Now wait just a minute," he began, his confidence faltering as Michael gave him a bemused look. Emma reached across the table and squeezed my hand, a silent gesture of support. This moment had been years in the making, though not exactly in the way my family might soon assume. I placed my teacup down with a soft clink against the saucer, the sound somehow cutting through the tension in the room. "Everything all right, Uncle Robert?" I asked, my voice calm. "You look concerned." "Jack," he said, his voice lower now, approaching our table with what he probably thought was casual nonchalance. "There's been a misunderstanding. I told them I'd be covering tonight." The unspoken part hung in the air. He never imagined the bill would be quite so steep, nor did he intend to actually pay it himself. Finally allowed myself to look directly at the bill, nodding as if considering something deeply important. Then I glanced up at my uncle's increasingly uncomfortable expression and smiled. "No misunderstanding at all, Uncle Robert. The table was indeed reserved for family tonight." I placed my American Express Centurion card on top of the bill, and "I'm happy to take care of my family." Daniel Martinez appeared just as Kevin whisked away my black card, his timing impeccable as always. "Mr. Wilson, I hope everything was to your satisfaction this evening," he said, with the perfect blend of professional courtesy and familiar respect. Uncle Robert's eyes narrowed at the interaction, his brain visibly working to process what was happening. "Excellent as always, Danielle," I replied, standing to shake his hand. "The changes to the duck confit were particularly successful." I turned to Emma and Michael. "Daniel's been implementing some menu adjustments we discussed last month. The reviews have been tremendous." Uncle Robert's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "You know each other?" he finally managed. Daniel smiled politely. "Of course. Mr. Wilson is an occasional customer," I interrupted smoothly, not quite ready to reveal everything. Michael suppressed a grin behind his hand, knowing exactly what I was doing. The strategic pause before the knockout punch had always been my favorite business tactic. Thomas, unable to read the room as usual, bulldozed into the conversation. "So, you're what, friends with the manager? That's your big secret?" His dismissive tone made Emma roll her eyes so hard I thought she might strain something. I accepted the receipt from Kevin with a nod of thanks before turning to face my family, fully. The moment had arrived, not born from petty revenge, but from years of being underestimated and dismissed. "Not exactly, Thomas. Daniel works for me, so does Kevin, so does everyone in this restaurant." I let that sink in for a moment. "And the other 7 restaurants in the Cerulean group." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ambient music seemed to pause. "It's impossible," Uncle Robert finally sputtered. "Cerulean Group is one of the most successful restaurant portfolios in the city. They just opened that place in Soho that's booked 6 months out." Michael couldn't contain himself any longer. "Meridian. Yes, that was Jack's concept. The fusion of Southern, American, and Korean cuisines. That was his grandmother's recipe book meets his college roommate's family techniques. He clapped me on the shoulder proudly. But the restaurants are just his side project. Our main business? Fine sink, finished Thomas's girlfriend suddenly. Oh my God, you're that Jack Wilson? The AI platform that just closed a $340 million 0 cents valuation round? Her recruitment background had finally connected all the dots. Aunt Patricia clutched her pearls tighter, her eyes darting between me and Uncle Robert, whose face had progressed through several interesting shades of red. "But you never said anything," she accused, as if my silence had been the true betrayal. I shrugged. Would it have mattered? At Christmas 3 years ago, I tried to tell everyone about our Series A funding. Uncle Robert said, and I quote, "Playing with computers isn't a real career, boy." The memory still stung, but now in a distant way, like an old injury that occasionally twinges in bad weather. "We thought you were just struggling," my cousin Melissa admitted, having the decency to look embarrassed. "With your little startup thing?" "Our little startup thing employs over 200 people," Michael added helpfully. "We're opening our London office next month." Uncle Robert seemed to physically deflate, the decades of condescension and superiority collapsing under the weight of reality. For a brief moment, I felt a flash of sympathy for him. His entire identity had been built around being the family success story. But then I remembered all the times he'd made my mother cry. All the family gatherings where my father had been belittled for his honest work as a high school teacher. The ride home that night was quieter than I'd expected. There's something strange about finally achieving a moment you've imagined for years. It never quite matches the version you've played in your head. Emma leaned against my shoulder in the back of our Uber, the city lights painting streaks across her face as we crossed the Brooklyn Bridge. "You're awfully quiet for someone who just orchestrated the most epic family takedown I've ever witnessed," she murmured, interlacing her fingers with mine. "Having second thoughts." I gazed out at the Manhattan skyline, each glittering light representing thousands of stories just like mine, people striving, failing, succeeding in ways their families would never fully understand. Not second thoughts, just different thoughts than I expected. The truth was, I hadn't paid that astronomical dinner bill out of spite or to show off my wealth. I'd done it because that's what family does. They take care of each other, even when it's not deserved. Uncle Robert had never understood that. Maybe he never would. As we pulled up to our brownstone, I remembered the look on my uncle's face as we left the restaurant. Not anger or resentment, but something that looked surprisingly like respect. He'd shaken my hand, firmly, meeting my eyes for what felt like the first time in my adult life. No words, just that handshake and a slight nod. "You know," Emma said as we climbed the steps to our front door, "your mom would have been proud of how you handled that tonight. Dignity intact, no gloating." She was right. My mother had always taught me that true success wasn't about proving others wrong, it was about proving yourself right. I took one last look at the night sky before closing our door. The family reunion next year would certainly be different. But maybe, just maybe, it would be better. Not because of money or status, but because truth has a way of clearing the air, making room for something new to grow.